Nadia stepped out from behind her register and put herself between a wealthy socialite and a terrified elderly Korean woman she had never met, in a room full of powerful people who all looked away. And that single act of courage cost her almost nothing and changed absolutely everything. The woman she defended was the mother of the most feared crime boss in the city. He watched the whole thing from the second floor. And when he came downstairs, he didn't speak to the socialite, didn't address the crowd, didn't do any of the things a man with his kind of power normally does. He walked directly to his mother, and he bowed, a full, 90-degree, 11-second bow. And the room went so quiet you could hear the champagne glasses stop sweating. By the next week, Nadia had been personally requested as his private client liaison. By week 6, she'd looked him up and found out exactly who he was, and she showed up anyway. If you are new here, subscribe right now, hit the bell so you don't miss a single one, and stay with me. Because this one goes places you are not prepared for. The Seojin Watch House was not a store. It was a cathedral. Nadia Okafor had understood that by her third day working there, and she had spent 6 months learning to move through it like a ghost. Silent, efficient, invisible by design. Her black blazer was pressed into perfect submission. Her locks were pinned up. Her smile was deployed on cue, the particular kind that doesn't reach the eyes because it was never supposed to. The kind that says, "I see you, and I will not cause a scene." She was very, very good at not causing scenes. The day everything changed, the boutique was hosting its quarterly flagship event. Velvet ropes, champagne towers, real security posted at intervals like parentheses around something valuable. The wealthy arrived in expensive shoes and the kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself because every room it walks into already knows. Nadia worked the ground floor with her usual quiet competence, directing guests, processing inquiries, staying in her lane. And then she noticed the woman in the queue. She was small. She was slow. She wore a charcoal hanbok-style jacket with a delicate silver brooch at the collar, and she moved through the roped-off private client area with the careful, deliberate steps of someone searching for a familiar face in a room full of strangers. Late 60s. Silver hair cut close. Dark eyes scanning, not finding what they needed. This crowd had no patience for small or slow, and Nadia filed the observation away, the way she always did, and turned back to her customer. She was halfway through an explanation when she heard it. Not a sound, exactly. An absence of one. The specific quality of silence that replaces ordinary noise when something has gone wrong. Not loud, airless. The kind that presses down on your chest like a hand. She looked up. A modest splash of champagne, a few drops on a cream-colored jacket cuff. That was all it was. That was the beginning of everything. The woman who had been splashed was perhaps 40. Angular. Aggressively maintained. Her name was Yunsul Kwan. Wife of a real estate developer whose name appeared on a third of the commercial facades in this district. She looked at the champagne on her wrist. She looked at the small silver-haired woman who had caused it, and something slid out of her face, something that might have been a person. What is wrong with you? Low, even, rehearsed. Loud anger is at least honest. This was something colder. This is a private event. Do you understand what private means? Who let you in? Look at you. The elderly woman began to bow immediately, the reflexive, repeated bow of deep cultural apology, head dipping forward and back. 죄송합니다. I am so sorry. My English. I don't care what you're trying to say. The crowd arranged itself into a theater. A semicircle of averted eyes and angled bodies that somehow still watched everything. No one moved. The security guard nearest to the queue had taken a pointed interest in the middle distance. Everyone had run the math. This is not my problem. Everyone had come out on the side of silence. Nadia felt the heat start below her sternum. She recognized it, She'd felt it at 12, in a school hallway, at 19, in a bodega, 6 months ago, in this very store. It was the heat of being asked to witness an injustice and file it away. The heat of social contract demanding she stay in her lane. The elderly woman had stopped bowing. She was standing very still now, with the look of someone who has discovered that the floor is not where they left it. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with the effort of not letting them fall. And that was the thing that broke the math entirely. Not the cruelty, not the crowd. Look, the effort of it. Nadia set down the service inquiry form. She came around the counter. She walked through the gap in the velvet ropes with the unhurried directness of someone who has made a decision and fully accepted the consequences. She positioned herself beside the silver-haired woman, not in front, not shielding her like she was helpless, but beside. One step closer to Yunsul Kwan, close enough for proximity to be unmistakable. She apologized, Nadia said. Quiet. Quieter than Yunsul's voice, but the kind of quiet that comes from weight, not smallness. Yunsul blinked. The appearance of a ground-floor salesgirl in a velvet rope zone did not compute. Excuse me? She apologized, repeatedly and sincerely. It was a small splash on your wrist. She said she was sorry. That is the end of what needs to happen here. Everyone thought Nadia would back down. The security guards thought so. The crowd thought so. Yunsul Kwan certainly thought so. That was the thing about being invisible this long. People forget to account for what invisible people are capable of when they finally decide to be seen. You have no idea who you're talking to, Yunsul said. I know exactly who I'm talking to, Nadia said at the same quiet volume. Someone having a bad moment, making a choice about what to do with it. There's still time to make a different one. And then, just as Yunsul's face went cold with the specific cruelty of someone deciding to make an example, the boutique went silent in an entirely different way. Not the airless silence of a crowd watching something ugly, something else. The silence of a room that has registered a shift in gravity. The brushed steel elevator doors had opened. He did not walk out with urgency. He did not announce himself. He simply appeared in the space the way things of significant mass appear, creating their own gravity without effort, reshaping everything around them just by being present. Tall, still, wearing a suit that had been cut with the kind of precision that looks effortless only because the effort behind it was extraordinary. He wore no watch. In a watch boutique? Nadia would think about that for a long time. He moved through the crowd without looking at the crowd. His eyes were fixed on one thing, the small silver-haired woman in the charcoal handbuck jacket. He walked directly toward her, not quickly, not with the panic of someone who'd heard a commotion, but with the measured certainty of someone who had already decided, before his feet hit the marble floor, exactly where he was going. He stopped in front of her. He looked at her face, at the brightness in her eyes and the careful set of her mouth and the way she was holding her clutch like the last certain thing in an uncertain room. And without a word, without a single sound, he bowed. Full, formal, 90 degrees, head down, both hands at his sides. In the center of the boutique floor, in front of everyone, in the specific sightline of Yunsul Kwan and the entire watching crowd, and Nadia Okafor, who had completely stopped breathing. 3 seconds, held, unhurried, a complete and unmistakable sentence spoken in a language older than English. Then he straightened, and the room understood what it was looking at. The small woman in the charcoal jacket was not someone who didn't belong here. She was the mother of the man who owned the room. And he had just said so, in front of God and Yunsul Kwan and everyone, in the most unambiguous possible terms. He turned and looked at Yunsul. Just looked. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look did something to the atmosphere the way pressure does to water, changing the behavior of everything in the room, completely, without being visible itself. Yunsil Kwan took a step backward that she probably didn't realize she was taking. Then he turned his gaze to Nadia. And Nadia, who had spent 26 years learning to be invisible, who had refined the art of not being noticed into something almost elegant, felt, for the first time in a very long time, thoroughly and completely seen. His eyes were dark, warm brown, not what she had expected from the severity of the rest of him. They moved over her face not with assessment, but with something closer to careful attention, like he was afraid of missing something. "You intervened," he said, unaccented, precise, every word placed with intention. "Someone needed to," she said. A beat. Something moved across his expression, quick, involuntary, something he caught and filed. "Yes," he said quietly. "They did." His name was Ryu Jonghyun. She would learn that 40 minutes later in the consultation room on the upper floor, the one with sage green walls and a walnut table, and his mother sitting across from her, watching them both with the patient, focused delight of someone who has already decided how this ends. Up close, the severity of his face was more nuanced than distance suggested. Fine lines at the corners of his eyes hinted at laughter. Private, infrequent, belonging to very few people. His hands, folded on the table, were completely steady. Everything about him was steady, which she found simultaneously unnerving and magnetic, the way calm, deep water makes you want to know what's at the bottom. They talked for 11 minutes about ordinary things, his mother's watch collection, the weather, the history of a particular movement style she happened to know. Ordinary things that had, somehow, the texture of something else entirely. Before Nadia left the room, Mrs. Ryu reached across the walnut table and took both of Nadia's hands in hers. She held them firmly and looked directly into Nadia's eyes and said something in Korean with the seriousness of a woman who says very few things without meaning them completely. Nadia looked at Ryu Jonghyun. He paused before translating, choosing the closest approximation, not a literal rendering. "She says," he said, his voice a degree lower than before, "that she hopes our paths continue to cross." He said our. He was looking at Nadia when he said it. She found out who he really was the next morning. Not from him. Not from her supervisor. She found out the way you find things you weren't looking for. Phone in hand, his name in a search bar. The casual air of someone who tells themselves they're not doing anything in particular. The results came back in under a second. She looked at her screen for a very long time. Then she set the phone face down on the break room table, picked up her tea, and stared at the wall. Ryu Jonghyun was not simply a wealthy man who loved his mother. He was the operating head of the Ryu Group, a name that appeared in 3 articles in 30 seconds, each more carefully worded than the last, using language like alleged influence over logistics networks and dominant interests in the Eastern Harbor District in the way that financial journalism uses careful language when what it actually means is something older and more structural than regulatory scrutiny. She stared at the wall. She thought about his eyes, the care with which he'd translated his mother's words, the patience of his quiet, the bow. She thought about what he'd said. "I am also careful, and I want you to know that in advance." In advance of what? She had asked. She understood now, and understanding it made the thing in her chest do something complicated, something that was partly warning and partly something she did not have a clean word for yet. Her alarm went off. 5 minutes to opening. She locked her phone. She stood, put on her blazer, went to her station. She had already, without consciously deciding it, marked Thursday on her internal calendar. Whether that was wisdom or something else entirely, she had not decided. She thought she had the situation completely managed. She was so wrong it would eventually rebuild her from the inside out. Thursday came the way consequential things tend to. Unremarkably, with gray skies, and the smell of rain on pavement and nothing in the morning to indicate that anything was about to change. Nadia arrived at 8:43. She hung her coat. She made tea. She went to her station. All of it with the deliberate ordinariness of someone walking on ice. Not rigid, but attentive. Measuring each step before committing weight to it. She had spent 3 days running the problem analytically. 4 more articles on the Ryu group. No criminal charges anywhere. A great deal of careful language everywhere. She understood, the way intelligent people understand things they would prefer not to, the distinction between those two facts. But she had spent the most time thinking about the bow. You could perform a bow. Nadia understood performance. She had been performing a version of herself for employers for 6 years. What she had seen was not performance. It was the part of a person that cannot be faked, even by someone very good at faking everything else. So she was honest with herself, because honesty was the only discipline she had built her life on. She was not afraid of Ryu Jonghyun. She was interested in him, and that, she knew, was the more dangerous thing. At 11:02, the elevator chimed. His mother came out first, and her face when she saw Nadia performed the same specific transformation, that focused, directed delight, the warmth of someone who has decided on a person and sees no reason to be ambiguous about it. She wore a deep plum coat with the same silver brooch. She moved through the room with the unhurried dignity Nadia now understood was not slowness, but intention. Ryu Jonghyun stepped out behind her, and he found Nadia's gaze before he had fully cleared the elevator doors. She met it steadily. She had decided, in 3 days of analysis, that she would not perform anything. Not comfort she didn't feel, not distance she didn't mean. She would be exactly what she was. Someone who knew more than she had 3 days ago, and was still here anyway. He stopped a few feet from her. "You came back," he said. "I work here," she said. "Yes." The smallest tilt of his head. "You also know who I am now." She didn't perform surprise. "How do you know I looked?" "Because you're intelligent, and because you wouldn't be standing here like this if you hadn't decided something." A pause. "Like whether to be afraid." "Are you asking if I'm afraid of you?" "No," he said. "I can see that you're not. I'm noting that you had every reason to be and made a different assessment. I want to understand the basis for it." She held his gaze. Then she said, "You bowed to her." A beat. The weight of it settled between them. "She is my mother," he said. "I know, that's the point. The way a man treats his mother is not the whole of who he is. But it is the part he cannot perform." He was quiet. The full-weighted quality of his quiet. Not empty, but dense. Like a room where all the furniture has been pushed to the walls. "You are?" he said finally, very difficult to account for. "I've been told," Nadia said, and walked toward the viewing area. 3 weeks ago, she had been invisible in this building. Now the most carefully guarded man in the Eastern District was watching her like she was the only moving thing in the room worth tracking. Something between those 3 weeks had quietly rearranged the gravity of everything around them, and neither of them was ready to name it yet. The appointment stretched to 3 hours. Mrs. Ryu had come for a specific dress watch, with a rectangular case and a hand wound movement, but the visit expanded the way good conversations do, filling available time, spilling past its original borders into something that no longer had the shape of an appointment at all. Nadia explained the difference between Swiss lever and coaxial escapements, while Mrs. Ryu listened with the expression of someone being told a story. Ryu Jonghyun sat slightly back from the table, mostly quiet, and Nadia became aware, gradually, that he was not watching the watches. He was watching her, not the way men watch women they want to impress. More like the way you watch something you're trying to understand. Careful, sustained, afraid of blinking in case you miss the thing that makes everything cohere. She knew because she kept catching herself doing the same thing to him. At some point near the 2-hour mark, Mrs. Ryu said something in Korean and gestured animatedly between them. Ryu Jonghyun's response was brief and dry. His mother laughed, full and delighted, covered with both hands, but not suppressed. "I don't suppose you're going to tell me what that was?" Nadia said. "No," he said. "She clearly wants me to know." "She clearly does. That is precisely why I am not going to tell you." He looked at his mother with the soft exasperation of the deeply loved. Then, "She says your earrings are different today." Nadia touched one reflexively, the hammered gold hoops her grandmother had brought back from a trip south decades ago. "They are. She says it seems as though you are also making an effort." The silence that followed was a particular color. Warm, slightly dangerous, aware of itself. And Nadia thought, he told her not to say that. She said it anyway. He translated it anyway. And right now he is looking at the display case with great focus. That tells me more than anything he has said with his mouth. When the appointment ended, he stayed near the east wall while his mother was guided to a seating area. "She likes you," he said. "I like her. That's not nothing. She's been hurt before by people she decided to trust." He paused. "I am also careful. And I want you to know that in advance." "In advance of what?" Something was being decided in the silence that followed. Something he was choosing between. "I would like to bring my mother here again," he said. "And I would like you to be here when I do." "That's a business arrangement," she said. "Yes," he agreed, and said nothing further, which somehow communicated everything that it wasn't. Here's what she didn't know about men like Ryu Jong-yun. They don't audition for your attention. They don't perform. They simply decide. And then they are consistent. And consistency is the most devastating thing in the world to someone who has been promised things that evaporated. She was about to find out exactly how devastating that could be. The appointments kept coming, Thursday after Thursday. Sometimes with his mother, sometimes alone. Always at 11. Always exactly on time. He brought her tea, a specific blend, slightly bitter, from a place she had mentioned once in passing. Left it at her counter without ceremony, as though it were simply a thing that needed doing. Not a gesture, not a signal. Just care made ordinary through repetition. She was accustomed to grand gestures. She had no category for quiet, unrelenting attention that asked for nothing in return. His mother treated Nadia's company as a foregone conclusion, teaching her the Korean names for watch complications, pressing food on her from containers she somehow produced from an immaculate handbag. Mrs. Ryu had decided, in the manner of women who operate at full personal authority, that Nadia was already family. The only remaining question in her assessment was paperwork. They went to dinner. A jazz club where Nadia knew the bassist, a street market she had been going to since college, and then her own kitchen. She cooked. He sat at her counter asking about every ingredient with genuine curiosity, and he washed every single dish afterward without being asked. Not as a performance, simply because it needed doing, and he was there. That told her more about the structure of who he was than any conversation could have. One night at a restaurant she had chosen specifically because it was hers, a West African place with hand-painted murals and a menu that hadn't changed in a decade because nothing needed to, he told her something true. He told her what his organization had been under his father, what he had spent 8 years trying to change. He didn't perform the vulnerability. He placed it on the table between them like a fact about his life and waited to see what she would do with it. She did not try to solve it. She sat with it. And that, he told her much later, was the thing that changed everything. He had become, without her quite tracking the moment it happened, the person she thought about when something was funny or strange or worth saying out loud. The person she saved things for. That was how she knew. Not the chemistry. She had managed the chemistry. It was the saving. The things she held onto to tell him later. The night she understood the full shape of what she felt, she was not with him. Sunday afternoon. Good amber light through the window. A book open on her lap that she was not reading, and she realized that the somewhere else her mind kept going was simply him. The gravity of his stillness, the way the real smile changed his face, the sound of his voice reading to her over the phone 2 nights ago. Something from a childhood book his mother had given him, dropping into Korean in a way that had made her close her eyes just to hear it better. She set the book down, picked up her phone. "Are you with your mother today?" she sent. His reply came back in under a minute. "No. I am sitting in my office not reading a report." She looked at the window. She looked at the book. "Come over," she sent. A pause. Longer than usual. "You are certain?" She thought about the distance. The kind you cross once, or the kind you keep crossing for as long as there is ground beneath you. "I'm certain," she sent. He arrived 40 minutes later, which told her he had not been as far away as his office suggested. She noticed this and chose not to mention it, because there was something that moved in her about the idea of him being close without requiring an invitation. Patient in his vicinity, the way he was patient in everything. She opened the door and he was there in the amber-lit hallway, dark coat, the look of someone who had understood exactly what certain meant and was treating the knowledge with appropriate care. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. She stepped aside. He came in and took in the apartment the way he took in everything about her, with genuine attention, not assessment. Books organized by emotional weight, photographs along one wall, charting the geography of her people across decades. He paused at one photograph. She came to stand beside him. "This is her," he said. Not a question. Her grandmother, maybe 40 in the photo, laughing at something off camera with the full-body commitment of a woman who laughed that way always. "Yes," Nadia said. He was quiet for a moment. "She looks like someone who made a room better by being in it." And Nadia's chest did the thing it had been doing for 6 weeks. The thing she'd been filing and examining and running the analysis on, which was simply this. It recognized him. As if something in her that had been searching had found what it was looking for and gone still. She turned to face him. He was already looking at her. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited. He was very good at waiting. "I spent a long time being careful," she said. "Not the strategic kind, the survival kind. The kind where you make yourself small so the room doesn't notice you well enough to hurt you. I have been trying to be careful about you. Running the analysis, managing the timeline, making sure I was deciding rather than feeling." She paused. "I'm done doing that." Something in his face went very still. The kind of still that happens when something held for a long time is finally, carefully set down. "Nadia," he said. Her name in his voice had weight, like it had been there, waiting to be said like that, for some time. "I'm not afraid of the dark," she said, echoing something she'd told him early on in a different context. "And I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of wasting what this is by trying to manage it from a safe distance." One step toward him, close enough to see the exact color of his eyes in her amber light. Dark, warm brown, completely attentive, not looking away. "So," he raised his hand to her face with a slowness that was reverence, not hesitation. His thumb traced her cheekbone the way you touch something you are fully aware of the value of. His eyes were asking a question his voice didn't need to. She answered it by closing the remaining distance. He kissed her with the same quality that characterized everything about him. Full attention, no performance, completely present. One hand at her jaw, the other finding the small of her back, and settling there with the certainty of someone who does not reach for things he is not sure of. She felt the warmth of him, the steadiness, the way his breath changed when she moved closer. And she thought, yes, this is the shape of it. This is exactly what this is. When they broke apart, his forehead came to rest against hers, eyes closed, breathing slower than his stillness suggested he needed to. "I have been," he said quietly into the small space between them. Waiting to do that since you walked through a velvet rope to defend a stranger? She laughed, surprised out of her, the real one, and felt him smile against her temple. Your mother is going to be insufferable about this, she said. She already is. She has been insufferable about it since day 2. She told me I was being slow. Nadia pulled back just enough to see his face. She told you that? In those exact words. She said, Son, that girl chose to stand between a stranger and the kind of cruelty that makes cowards of everyone else. What exactly are you waiting for? Nadia shook her head slowly. I love your mother. I know, he said softly. She knows too. She would like you to come to dinner. Next Sunday. She has apparently already determined the menu. He reached up and tucked one loose lock behind her ear. A gesture so unhurried and so certain that it ached. And if you say yes? Then I say yes, she said. He said nothing, but his hand found hers and held it with the calm conviction of someone who does not reach for things he is not certain of, and who, having reached, does not let go. 8 months later, the Seojin Watch House held its annual gala. Different room, grander chandeliers. The music was good. Nadia wore a dress a friend of her grandmother's had made. Midnight blue, fitted, built with the kind of intention that knew exactly what it was doing. Her locks were down. Her grandmother's gold earrings. She was not performing anything. Not tonight. Not anymore. She arrived with Ryu Jonghyun, who had her hand in his with the straightforward ease of a man who has decided on a thing and requires no audience for it. Mrs. Ryu walked on her other side in the plum coat, the new dress watch catching light with every small movement of her wrist. The three of them moved through the room together as a complete thing, and anyone who understood anything could see it. The room noticed them. Rooms always did, when he entered. Nadia had learned, over 8 months, to carry that noticing without shrinking from it or performing for it. She was simply herself, in a room that was now also hers. Yunsul Kwan was there. Nadia saw her first, across the room, champagne in hand, a new expensive coat. Yunsul saw Nadia a moment later, and something moved across her face. A rapid recalibration. She saw the man whose hand Nadia was holding. She saw Mrs. Ryu on Nadia's other side. She saw, apparently, something in the geometry of the three of them that told her everything she needed to know, and she turned, with great and sudden enthusiasm, toward a conversation on the other side of the room. Nadia looked forward. Mrs. Ryu said something close to her ear, warm and quiet. Nadia had been taking Korean lessons for 4 months, not fluent, but enough to catch the shape of things. She caught most of it, but she waited. She says you walk like you know where you belong, Ryu Jonghyun translated, his voice close and warm near her temple. I do now, Nadia said. He looked at her, and there was the full weight of everything 8 months contained. The tea at her counter, the dinners, her kitchen at amber hour. The conversations that started at 6 in the evening and ended when the light changed. The extraordinary, unassuming patience of a man who had said, I will wait for as long as it takes, and had meant every single word. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. Not for the room, not for anyone watching, simply a bow of a different kind, a reverence for what was in his hand. She did not look away from his face. Around them, the room continued. The music was good. Mrs. Ryu, between them, shone like something that had been waiting a very long time to shine, and had known, the whole time, that it would. And Nadia Celestine Okafor, who had spent 26 years making herself invisible, who had learned to smile in ways that didn't reach her eyes, who had filed away 1,000 injustices to keep her lane clear, stood in the middle of everything, seen, claimed, completely at home in the light she had always deserved. The light that took one act of ordinary courage in a crowd full of people who looked away to finally step into. If this story found its way to you, subscribe, hit the bell, and share it with someone who needed to hear it today. The best ones always begin with a single act of courage, in a crowd full of people who looked away, and one person who refused.